So if you haven't got a will and you don't know, how long could that take?
Okay. So exactly. So you actually don't know a lot of information right at the start. It's quite rare for a family member to know unless the deceased really prepared the executor and said, this is the folder with all the information and those are the statements and everything is here. I've written everything down. That's quite rare. The most of us these days don't keep all these types of records, and of course a lot of information is now online, not in paper. So even if the deceased thought, oh yes, it's all very straightforward from my perspective in my own mind and my own affairs, a lot of information may be online. And as I say, there's no centralized system to notify, let's say, one body that will search everything and will provide you with all the details. So you do have to start off with collating information bit by bit. And it could be that you will have to notify the banks so that they all check whether their details for the deceased within those banks. It could be that you would have to ask for financial institutions to do a broader check on pensions, dormant assets, etc. To have a look, is there anything that I'm missing? I may have known about these bank accounts or this investment, but I might not know overall if there was anything else. So it is becoming, actually, in this digitalized age, a lot more complicated to track everything. So it will take sometimes several months to get to the point of saying, oh, now I kind of understand what it is for sure. And therefore then make a decision as to whether I will need now official documentation to collate everything, or whether I'll be able to deal with just one little part and that'll be it. So if you do need the official grant of probate, this is where the timescale sort of escalate a little bit further, because you were going through an official court process, and the courts will have their own timescales as to how they will deal with it and how quickly. So at the moment we have a two-tier system. We have online system for estates that have a will, and if there is a will that is correctly executed, it will go through an online application process. All the documentation is also prepared in paper and then submitted through online and paper form to them. And it generally takes around 16 weeks for them to process documentation. Some cases quicker, some cases a bit longer. So you're talking about a 4-month period that perhaps you'll have to wait to actually get that documentation. Very frustrating when you can't move forward in that 4-week period to do anything else, particularly if you got a buyer waiting for a property and they're wanting to exchange contracts and you can't. So it can be quite a frustrating process. If there is no will, the only time that you can apply for a grant of probate online if there's only one sole beneficiary. So for example, the deceased left a wife as the sole beneficiary, and therefore then that process is quite straightforward. But if the deceased had left no will and there are multiple beneficiaries, perhaps the siblings that or nephews and nieces inheriting, then it's a paper application process with details of all the beneficiaries and who has the authority then to apply for the official documentation. So that process, unfortunately, at the moment, as we speak, it is much longer than 16 weeks. As it's seen as a more complex situation to investigate, it requires an official that is qualified to assess these things. So it can take, I would say, up to 6 months in order to deal with that. Now, not also to add, if inheritance tax needs to be paid, you have to add, of course, the time frame into that as well, that you will need to complete the documentation for the HMRC. HMRC take around 3 weeks or so to issue a reference number. And then once you've actually paid the funds to them, they'll take another 4 weeks or so in order to provide a receipt. So it's not a quick process. As I say, if you have to deal with HMRC, unfortunately you have to wait and deal with those on a week by week basis until you get to the point where you can apply for probate.